Welcome back to the SSL Family Dad channel. We are here in the garage with our wood stack, our wood stash. We are here in Michigan. It's July, middle of the summer, and we have been collecting and splitting wood just as fast as we can throughout the year here to get ready for this coming heating season. Now, obviously, ideally, we would be cutting and splitting wood that wouldn't be used until next heating season. We would be a year ahead, and we'll get there this year. I've got plenty of wood prepared and ready to do that, but we just moved into this homestead this past year, and we're trying to catch up and get ahead. And so that's where we're at. And I'm sure many of you out there have found yourself in this position before. So what do you do if you're in this position where you need to cut and split wood that you're going to plan to burn the same year, the same heating season? So today I'm going to go through some tips and tricks on how to dry your wood or season your wood, your firewood, as fast as possible. So there's some things you can do that we have found over the years that will get that wood in a burnable state. It's not going to be as good as stuff that's seasoned for a whole year, but it will be pretty efficient and fairly dry. Good seasoned firewood that we've used for many years. We have been heating with wood for quite a few years now. We've heated at our old homestead with an outdoor wood boiler, heated a greenhouse, heated our home, hot water, all those things. We also heated with a standalone wood stove, and then here at the new house, we heat with two fairly large fireplace inserts with blowers on them. And so we're going to burn a lot of wood. Couple things before we get into the process here. So number one, the moisture content that we're looking for, the target moisture content in firewood to be burning in indoor wood stoves, is going to be about 15 to 20%. You're not going to find too much wood, at least up here in Michigan. We have pretty humid air, and so you're not going to find wood that's seasoned outside anyway, that's not kiln dried, that's going to get much drier than 15%. That's about the driest you're going to see. I've seen some that's gotten down to 12% if we dry it inside and other places, but generally the humidity in the air here is enough to prevent it from getting any drier than that. 20% is a little bit on the high side, but you certainly can burn that inside with no problem. If you have moisture content that is higher than 20% in your wood, certainly it's burnable generally, but you're going to end up getting a lot less efficiency out of it, meaning you're going to use more wood to get a lot less heat. You're also going to gum up your chimney and your fireplace a lot sooner, so you'll notice the glass will get dirty, sooted up, and all that creosote and everything will build up, and it also is building up in your chimney, which can cause chimney fires, so you need to clean your chimneys out more often. So we want to stick within that target range of 15 to 20% if we can. So let me show you some of the wood that we have processed so far this year and a few of the different tips and tricks that we use to help that wood get seasoned as quickly as possible and even be able to burn in the same year that it was cut and split. All right, so we have several stacks of wood here, all from the same trees or same batches of trees that were cut down. All of this wood was cut down late winter of this year, 2021, and it was cut up and processed into large logs and then brought to our house here where it sat for a while. This stuff here was just split yesterday. And so there's a lot of hardwoods in here, there's a lot of oak, there's actually some ash in here, some maple and some other things. And then throughout here we have, kind of gets older and older. This was processed a few weeks ago, this about a month ago, and this about 2.5 months ago, 2 months ago. The first stacks here. So this stuff here has been sitting in here for about a month and a half actually, and been drying. And so we've got a lot of oak and a lot of black walnut in these this first batch. So let's go through and do some moisture checks right now and see where we're at in the seasoning process with the green stuff, the stuff that was just split and just processed versus the stuff that's been sitting in here for a little while. And let's see where we're at just to start. So we will be using a pretty simple moisture meter here. It has the two prongs on it and basically uses a little electrical charge that it transmits between the two. The more wet the wood is, the easier the electrical charge will transmit, and it has a little algorithm built in that basically converts that into a percentage of moisture. So we'll be using this to test our wood. This is a good tool to have to check your firewood. And it's pretty cheap. I bought this one on Amazon. I will put a link in the description so you can grab one for yourself if you'd like to. So let's test the stuff that we just processed here first. So we'll test this. So this stuff is pretty moist. That was measuring about 23%. I don't know if you could see it on there because of the glare. And some of this stuff is pretty wet. So that one was like 45%. So pretty green wood. Now this has actually been cut into logs for a few months, but it has just been recently split. So some of the stuff that was cut off of the inside of those logs will be a little bit wetter than some of the stuff on the outside. And then I've got some of the stuff here that was split a couple months ago, and it's been drying or seasoning. This is a piece of oak here, and so we'll test this. And this stuff is already in the drying range at the ends. Let's test it on the sides here as well. So that red light means it is in the high rate, anything between over 15%. It'll give you a high moisture content for firewood. So still drying here in the center. A little drier on that side. Closer out to the ends, we're going to get a lower reading. So just in the way that this wood was processed, just in 2 months, this is already pretty close to burnable. So first of all, different kinds of wood are going to dry at different rates. Obviously these are all different kinds of species of wood. Sometimes it's hard to tell, what kind of wood you're dealing with if you weren't the one to cut the trees down. If you just end up with a bunch of logs that you maybe picked up from somebody, or trees that have been dead or down in your forest. But there's a couple signs, obviously. So harder woods, if you're looking at a harder wood like an oak or an ash or cherry or hard maple or something like that, you can look right at the end and just see. You don't even need to know what species it is. If the grain is really tight, especially when you get into the heartwood, the inside here, you can see the lines get real close together. That's a really tight grain or really dense wood. Now, if you're looking at something like a cottonwood or something like that, you can see, this is probably a piece of cottonwood right here. This is really stringy when it's cut. That's another sign of it. But the grain on here, it's hard to tell, but the grain is real wide apart. I mean, some of the rings are this far apart. It grows super fast. And so that's going to be a wood that is a lot softer. So with that being said, the wood is really going to dry a couple different ways. Mainly it's going to dry out of the end grain. So the grain of wood is kind of like straws with the end here. And so when you cut into that wood, you're allowing the moisture to kind of slowly and gradually kind of work its way out. As it dries out, it pulls more moisture out to the ends. It's also going to seep out of the sides here. It will transfer even from the center of the wood, out to these exposed grains on the wood on the side here. So one way to get your wood to dry quicker is to cut it into shorter pieces. If you really want to dry wood quick, I mean, these are about 16-inch pieces. We can fit up to 20 inches in our wood stoves, but you could cut these into you could cut all your wood into 12-inch sections or 10-inch sections. You're going to do a lot more cutting and splitting and having smaller pieces of wood, but it certainly will dry much quicker. The other thing that we do is a couple splitting techniques. So I split wood in several different ways. One of them is these kind of rectangular pieces. You notice that the bark on the outside, this is going to prevent moisture from escaping out of here, so I want the least amount of bark on it as possible. In fact, if you can get the bark off, or if it's falling off, that's better. But we want to have these really thin pieces. This gives a lot of surface area on each side and on the ends here where the moisture can escape out of this wood. And so this is going to dry a lot quicker than a giant square piece or even a fully uncut round piece like this. In fact, for anything bigger than this, I will split even these smaller pieces a lot of times right in half so that you expose all that center piece of the wood, and that will allow it to dry a lot quicker. So this is another example of what I do to a lot of these is I'll split, especially the heartwood or the center pieces of a larger log. Those are going to be the wettest. Even if those logs have been sitting out there for a while, that heartwood does not dry out unless it's exposed. And so I'll cut a lot of times these small, real small sections out of the heartwood or the center of that tree or those logs, and that'll allow this to dry out a lot quicker. Even this piece right here that was probably 30%, 40% moisture content just a couple months ago is now technically burnable. Even though we could still dry it a little more, it's definitely burnable at this point. So obviously one of the downsides to having to split all your wood really small is, yes, it's going to dry out quicker and it will be burnable quicker, but you're really hurting yourself on your overnight burns or your longevity of a burn. So ideally we would have a log that's this big, that's nice and seasoned, it's been dried for a year, and those are great to throw in there for your longer burns during the day. Maybe you're out for a while or overnight, things like that. These little pieces of wood are going to burn quicker, but they're going to burn better, of course, because they're seasoned. But one of the things you can do with your wood that's cut and split like this, it's flat on most sides, is that you can actually stack those together. So you can use several pieces of wood because of the flat sides and put those together in your stove, and you kind of make yourself a big log because of the way they sit together. So a lot of times I'll do this for overnight burns. I'll find as many of the flat pieces in the stack as I can, and I'll take those and stick those all in the fire together, and then they kind of burn as one big log. Not quite as good, but it still helps to slow the burn down, but you're still getting a good burn off that piece of wood. So it'll last much longer, and it won't smoke or all that, but it'll still burn real good for you. So you'll also notice that a lot of the bark pieces, now obviously logs of all different sizes are going to split in all different kinds of ways. You can see here an example of a round branch piece that I had that I just split in half, and then you've got a lot of round spot on that, a lot of bark still on that, but because of its size, this should still dry out pretty good because of the surface area here and through the end grain. Also, a lot of these pieces, I've got a lot of bark on them, but I made them real thin. All those outside pieces that have the bark on them, I try to either cut a real thin piece, because again that bark's going to prevent the moisture from coming out, or again I'll try to cut it long this way so it just has a smaller bark side on it, and that'll help this to dry out quicker. So the next part of this is how you stack and season and dry the wood. Here you'll see that there's lots of various sizes. Everything's not complete rectangles, everything's not flat, because you don't want everything to stack together where there's no air gaps in between. You want to have a lot of holes in your stack. In between all of our stacks of wood, there's a large air gap, so I make sure that we've got plenty of room for air to flow through here. This one's a little bit tight. You can see this one here has a lot more space, so this is a little better. Also, I'm using either metal racks here in these cases where it actually keeps the wood up off the floor. So this is a 2x4 on edge that all the wood is sitting on. Or I have, in these cases, you can't really see it, but there's a 2x4 just laying flat to keep all the wood off of the floor. So concrete can also breathe a lot of moisture, and so we want to keep it off the concrete a little bit and allow air to get in there. So here, obviously, we are stacking all of our wood in a garage. So we have extra space in a garage here where we're keeping it. We also keep the door open almost all the time. Unless it's raining, we'll close the door, but we always keep it open, just have air circulating in here. If you can't stack it in a garage, it's good to put it in a barn or in a lean-to or somewhere that's covered. You don't want to have this sitting out in the rain. Even though wood will still season, if it's just sitting out in, it gets rained on, it dries out, or even if you tarp over the top of it or something like that, it's best to have it inside a location like this where it's completely covered from the rain, but it still has lots of airflow around it. It doesn't have anything sitting on top of it. It's not covered with anything, and you really get a lot of airflow. So that's going to help your wood season a lot quicker as well. All right, so a recap on all the different things that we just went through. We went through a lot of different things. And so number one, know the kind of wood that you're dealing with. The tighter end grain, the harder the wood, the denser the wood, the longer it's going to take to dry, which means that if you need to get it seasoned in 1 year or less, then you need to cut it shorter. You need to cut it into smaller pieces, and you need to make sure that it gets into a dry place to get seasoned as quickly as possible. Use the splitting techniques of getting the heartwood out into the smallest pieces so that you've got all these sides ready and available to dispatch that moisture out of there. Your bark pieces, the pieces that still have bark on them, if the bark's falling off, get it out of there. If not, you want to cut those as small as possible, real thin, or you can split like this, which leaves a very thin piece of bark on one end and then gives you lots of surface area available on all three sides here to to get that moisture out. And so this is the technique that I use the most, but again, you're going to use kind of all three of these techniques because you want all different sizes and shapes of wood. Also, a bonus tip, if you want to start with the lowest moisture content wood, cutting wood in the spring or summer or even the fall is going to give you the highest moisture content. The trees are filled with water. In the wintertime, generally, deciduous trees, they do lose a lot of their moisture, and a lot of that goes down into the roots, and they're not uptaking a lot of moisture. There's not a lot of capillary effect going on there. You're not feeding the leaves at the top of the trees and all that stuff, and so they actually have a lower moisture content to start. So if you do a lot of your wood cutting in the wintertime, you'll start off with a wood that is already drier all the way throughout the wood, center and all. So let me know what you guys think. Do you have any tips and tricks to share? How do you dry or season wood as quickly as possible? In 1 season or less, that's the goal here. We have been in this position several times at our new homestead here, as well as when we moved into our last homestead. The first year, we were behind on wood collection, and it took us a whole 2 years really to get ahead of that and come up with a good system so that we had good seasoned wood ahead of time every year. We'll get there, and hopefully you will too. But in the meantime, if you're in a pinch, use some of these tips and tricks to get that wood seasoned and dried as quickly as possible. The lower the moisture content, the better that wood's going to burn, the less you're going to have to clean your chimney, the more heat you're going to get out of it, and you're just going to be much happier. So don't forget to hit thumbs up on today's video. Hopefully you've enjoyed, and even if you haven't, hit thumbs up anyway. It'd be really nice of you. And if this is your first time to the SSL Family Dad channel, we'd love to have you subscribe and tag along. We've got lots of fun stuff coming up. We build things, we create things, we fix things that are broken, and take care of animals, and try to provide as much food as we can for ourselves through gardening and raising livestock and other things. And so love to have you tag along for all that. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. Have a good one.